welcome back to Do It on the Day, a video game podcast by Jess McDonnell. I don't know if that's going to end up being the full title. The title is still in the works, much like the logo, the thumbnails, the way that I title these, aside from that title, which is the title of the podcast. Everything's in the works, in flux, like life and the games industry and my inability to finish a sentence or stick with a thought. If you have joined me for the last two episodes, I really hope you enjoyed them. I appreciate that you're here now. If you didn't enjoy them, that is totally valid. Some have called this podcast maddening and some maddeningly entertaining. Hopefully you're part of the latter, but if you're part of the former, I understand and I still appreciate you for giving me a red hot go. Today in the podcast that has segments, it does have segments. Those segments are not necessarily the same every single time I do this because I've realized that when I go in on a segment, there is no way to do it in a curt 10 minutes since I've dedicated the ethos of this to not only doing it on the day, and it is the day that it's going out right now. So, ooh, it's so hot and fresh like cinnamon donuts, possibly the world's best dessert. Also, I've dedicated myself to not editing this, or at least not over editing it. It's very rare that I'll edit something out, and hopefully that's fun. Much like the new channel trailer I have on YouTube, or I've also posted it as an Instagram reel and a TikTok reel, which, if you haven't caught it, was me saying, isn't it nice listening to a podcast where someone may or may not know what they're talking about and just rambles endlessly? Isn't that fun? And boy, I hope it is. Look, ratio-wise, look, it's got one comment on TikTok with someone being like, no, I don't want my time wasted. And that's sure. Yeah, but the vast majority of you said you're into it. So that's great. I'm glad. We'll keep going. But do keep giving me your feedback. We'll iterate as we go. But yes, we do have segments today and in all these episodes. Some of them will be new. Originally, I was thinking we'd do like 6. I don't want to keep giving you podcasts that are an hour and 20 minutes. But as I've said, I think before, the game developers often say that a game will be out, quote unquote, when it's ready. This may be an approach where the podcast is the length that it is. Is that a mistake? I gotta stop asking questions that I don't want the answer to, but you can answer it anyway. Please do give me your comments, questions, anything that you have to share that you think is funny, that you think is weird. Again, I think as I said in last episode, if there's a sentence I started you would like finished, I can certainly give that to you as well. I'm reading all your comments, and I'm watching you consume this across the audio platforms. If you're on Spotify and Apple, and also those of you who are on the Patreon and the Coffee and YouTube, wherever you are. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you've had a wonderful day and continue to. We have a brand new segment today that I'm adding. Is it the first one I'm doing? Nope, it's the second one. There's only like 3 segments today. Possibly a fourth, also new segment. I made a note to myself not to mention the segments I had planned at the beginning of these videos because every time I've intended to deliver something and then I've run so over my intended time that it hasn't happened, and I don't want to promise you something and then it doesn't happen, but maybe that's life. Is that grim? It feels a little grim. Anyway, let's crack right in. I could crack right in less than 5 minutes. That could be a good new iteration. That's the end of that intro. The first segment is what I've been playing. I've been playing a few different things, but I've already told you I'm playing Outer Worlds 2, and I do have something I want to say about that in the upcoming segment that I thought was first, but it's actually second. So we'll talk a little bit about that there. If you missed it, I told you about Case of the Golden Idol I've been playing, which is fantastic. But today, the game I'm going to tell you about is Dispatch. This is sort of the hot new game on the market. I actually didn't know much about this one going in, and I just want to make sure I'm telling you everything accurately. Because it's a really interesting way this one evolved. Now, I just knew that it had been in the works for a really long time. That it was coming from veteran game devs in the space who were doing something really interesting, and that it was just a labor of love to make this exist. So let me give you the skinny on why people are really excited about it. So essentially, it's been made by Telltale devs, which kind of makes sense as to why it has a bunch of decision making mechanics and all of that, and they work very effectively. And it also explains why the dialogue is quite entertaining. It's got a narrative that really sticks its claws into you. It's being released episodically, which will also not come as a surprise given the game devs it's coming from. But the episodes are good bite-sized chunks that combine not only narrative elements where you are making decisions, meeting characters, and presumably, and I don't know too much about this yet, I'm at the end of the third episode right now. So I'm still sort of early days. If you've been really committed to this one, you'll be much further in than me. But it's at a point where there's not just the narrative to get embedded in, which, by the way, is all being delivered via a protagonist voiced by Aaron Paul, who's fantastic and I think is really good at grounding what could otherwise be a fairly typical "these aren't the superheroes you were hoping for" kind of narrative. Not so far afield as a Suicide Squad, but sort of heading in that direction of you're in charge of kind of a bunch of losers and trying to make them less losers. But what's fantastic is not only is the narrative ongoing, there's a really engaging, I want to say mini game, but it's a mechanic where you're thrown into the actual dispatching part of dispatch, which is to say you are in charge of sending out these superheroes to tackle crimes uh, and whatnot. Some of them are more like cat stuck up a tree type things, and some of them are entire heists. And you have a selection of heroes that you can send out. I believe you have like 6 or 7. I just hit a point where you need to get rid of one. Now, I won't spoil anything here in terms of the narrative. As I said, I'm not too far in, but I don't want to tell you too much given it's a really heavy on the narrative through line kind of game. That's a lot of the satisfaction. But within this central game mechanic in this portion of the game, you have to balance the individual strengths of each of these characters that exist in sort of like a generated prism that extends to different areas. You might have seen a similar thing. A lot of JRPGs do it. So it will extend out as you gain skill points in each of the areas, and you can assign that toward charisma, intelligence, vigor, which is sort of like your defense stat, combat, and then certain encounters, certain things that crop up on the map that will demand your attention, that you'll need to tackle, will call for different variations of those skill sets. Sometimes you can send one hero, sometimes more than one. At this point, for me, it's up to 3. As they level up, some of them also get special abilities where if they're teamed up in a certain configuration or not teamed up at all, they get a bonus. Those things are really fun to manage, and these emergencies come up quite quickly. And whilst it seems like it might be simple, you have to interpret from just a really quick bullet point description of each encounter what kind of skill set you need to send, whether that skill set exists in 1 hero, 2, 3, you name it. It will say a couple of things like you have to head along to the mayor's ribbon cutting ceremony, and basically you need to sell your superhero force, make them look good, and defend said political figure if necessary. So you can guess from that that perhaps you need to either have one hero or a combined set of heroes that are good at vigor, which would be your defense, your protection kind of section, and then perhaps a little bit of combat if there's a suggestion that there might be any kind of conflict, but certainly something on the charisma side. Sometimes in those interactions, you'll also be called on to engage in an emergency last minute, hey, you got to make a decision on how we should proceed. So it might be something like, these enemies we're fighting are pushing back in a way we didn't expect. Should we talk them down, fight a way through them, or escape? So one of those is going to be mobility based, would be escape, charisma, talking them through it, fighting your way through, possibly vigor, possibly combat. And that's one of the tricky things that I think you'd really develop a knowledge of quite quickly the further you go through it. But there is some interpretation necessary to figure out exactly what is being asked of you, because it doesn't illustrate exactly what kind of skill set you're supposed to be sending to meet the requirements of the mission. And the other thing that's really difficult to manage is that you'll send out the heroes, and when they return, first you'll be able to look at a mission summary where essentially your prism of whether it's one hero, two heroes, whatever's pulling out towards the maximum amount of stats from all those categories from the center, which is no skill in any of them, will be superimposed on top of the generated prism for that necessary mission. Then you got a little ball jumping around Pong style within those two prisms to determine whether or not you were successful at meeting the encounter and taking care of it. There's a little bit of RNG here, and I've noticed my RNG is terrible. I'm not sure if it's kind of specifically designed for you to fail a lot early on. There is narrative elements to this, which I think are stronger, intended to be stronger than actually pulling off the minigame really well. For example, early on, you're having issues with the crew. Sometimes they just say they don't want to go do something. That's obviously designed to have the narrative and that conflict and that character evolution is at the forefront, not you succeeding in as many missions as possible. That's hard for me because I just want to do really well. But it's not the point. The point, at least certainly at the beginning, is that your crew's kind of shit and they're not playing ball with you. They don't respect you. They don't like you, despite the fact that you're sort of a current, sort of an ex superhero, but essentially at this point in time, you've lost your abilities. So that's the main thing that's going on. But yeah, it's an interesting setup, and I think it's quite effective at combining those two things in an interesting way. I did feel like early on in the game, there's a lot of what I guess, if you know the term, is described as like Whedon speak. The humor is sort of that old school comic book, a little bit juvenile. And look, if you know anything about me, I am not opposed to juvenile humor or an innuendo or a dick joke. That's fine. There's just a lot of it. A lot of the characters are so abrasive, and unlikable at the beginning. One of them, this blonde woman, who is a superhero that hires you for this job at the very beginning of the game in the first episode, hits on you relentlessly, and it's so awkward. And I guess if you were just like, yeah, let's go, it would be like more exciting or engaging or less weird. Personally, I was like, this is really strange and unprofessional. She's just chatting to you and then she offers you a job. you do at one point have the ability to be like, y'all need HR. Like, what the fuck? And then later on, this is in the second episode, so, and not particularly spoilery, but you find out she has a boyfriend. When she was hitting on you, you're given the opportunity to kiss her at one point before you find that out. Essentially, upon finding that out, I don't know if this is me being in my 30s, but I'm like, I'm not touching your mess. Then she goes, I broke up with him. I'm like, girl, I'm not touching your chaotic life with a 10-foot pole. No, thank you. That's a disaster. So I'm kind of looking forward to having more opportunities to just weigh in on and be a part of the narrative in a way that feels uh accurate to the approach I want to have should I have been that protagonist in those situations. And so far, you can be pretty dismissive. There's a section at the beginning of the game. You're at a press conference. You have been a part of a situation where your father was killed before the events of the game, and a snarky reporter has a go at you, essentially saying a lot of superheroes would avenge their father, and you didn't. You failed. You're given the option to punch that reporter, and I 100% did that. And then it follows on with a funny bit. A reflection that you hear after the fact from that very reporter, I believe, where you find out everyone in the room was just kind of like, yeah, cool. Nobody stepped in. Apparently, the public was just like, yeah, let's go. Like, people aren't necessarily a fan of you, but the fact that this guy was like, yeah, no. Everyone was like, cool, that guy got punched, and no one in the room came to his aid. He's like, yeah, I noticed when no one came to my aid for several minutes that they were kind of against me there. And I like that stuff. There is a bunch of things that are quite funny, and even the things that are cringy or why is this happening, it's enjoyable to talk about them or laugh at them in like a B movie way, or just watching, anybody bumbling in. And it's a comic book game. It's about a whole suite of superheroes. It is that Avengers style humor. It is in the realm of I would say like more evolved, but Whedon speak, which before Joss Whedon was pretty fun. It became like sort of too overdone by Endgame, but it's a fun way of talking. It's something that has evolved and belonged to comic books well before Whedon shows as well. Joss Whedon, if you don't know, being the creator of Buffy and Angel and Firefly, and I also believe directed Endgame, I think, or at least one Avengers. Yeah. Sometimes I gotta remember my the necessity of telling you things, assuming you don't always know what I'm talking about. But anyway, yeah, I think this is the fact that it is from ex Telltale devs who I believe worked on The Wolf Among Us and perhaps Tales from the Borderlands. Yeah, I think you can really see that energy, the humor. Now that I'm just checking those facts on my right hand side here, if you are watching this, if you're listening to it, that's confusing. Yeah, it's got the humor from Tales from the Borderlands, which is my favorite Telltale game. It's so silly in a delightful way, and I think the things that have been making me feel less that way about this game are just there's a lot of immediate crude humor you're thrown right in. You don't really know like any of the characters particularly well, but I think that that's part of it, and I think that you're expected and invited rather to evolve along with it, to get to know the characters and to begin at a place where the characters suck. In Tales from the Borderlands, your characters are immediately empathetic. They're flawed, and there are definitely elements of them that are annoying or arrogant or unhelpful to the other characters and the mission that they're all trying to do together. But they feel like lovable anti-heroes. This game is not afraid to have a bunch of characters that at the beginning you're told at one point that you're going to have to fire one of them. And upon being told that, and then being thrown into a dispatching segment where they all decided to basically do the equivalent of putting their foot out to trip the other one up on their way to missions, to the point where I was being quite careful and tactical, and I love the strategy about sending them out to do this, that, or the other thing in a very careful way, where I've monitored the kinds of missions that have come up, who's resting, who's in reserve, what I need right now. So very particularly picking two characters to go out to take care of a mission, and one of them just decides to fuck the other one over and essentially force me into a skill check situation where I have to either pass that, and even if I do pass that, they don't go to the mission, they just go back. And if I don't pass it, they get injured, was really pissing me off. And it's definitely intentional, which is why I say the narrative is paramount and these dispatching mechanics are secondary, at least in my experience from the first 3 episodes. I believe there are 8 all up, so I have a long way to go. And I will be playing more at the Sunday stream and the Monday stream. So if you happen to be watching this before either of those, come check it out if you'd like. But yeah, I think it's your protagonist is fucking fed up with these guys and super over it. So it makes sense that it is delivered in that central minigame mechanical area where they're fucking you over too. So you feel exactly the way that Aaron Paul feels. And I think that that's really smart and that's really enjoyable. The art style is lovely. The colors are fantastic. There are beautiful cutscenes that play out that show particularly the action that's going on when someone needs to take on an enemy superhero, or it's giving you the beginning prelude of how you end up where you're at, which is just super down and out, and just a complete fall from grace situation, which again, I don't want to tell you too much, but yeah, it's a really interesting kind of approach. It's taken me a little bit to warm up to the eccentricities of it. But I feel like the more I play it, the more I appreciate it. I do think it gets better quite quickly. And you see and appreciate things like that the minigame part is subsidiary, at least early on, that it's really taking you along an intended narrative, which is what Telltale's always done. It's what Tales from the Borderlands was. It's what Wolf Among Us did so well. Obviously, Walking Dead, you would probably know best. But yeah, I think that it's a really interesting way of approaching what has been a controversial genre in the past. That is to say, games that let you make your own choices. Particularly the ones from Telltale, because there is the ongoing complaint that it is the illusion of choice. You don't actually get to make meaningful choices. To which I would argue, yeah, of course it is. These are narrative-based games that really want to be telling you a story. It doesn't mean you have no agency. It doesn't mean that you won't find certain things meaningful, but in order to deliver you an end-to-end story that is supposed to hit certain beats and make you feel certain things, unless it's a situation where you have like a David Cage, Quantic Dream, we're talking Heavy Rain later on, enormous swaths of options, of threads in Detroit Become Human, that map of the different things you can do and all the places they could possibly land was ludicrous. I think if you have all the budget in the world, yes, you can have meaningful narratives that all coexist within the same game, that is run on beautiful cutscenes and really well delivered performances that immerse you in the experience. And perhaps you can have completely different experiences. But I think by and large for these games, they have an idea about where they want to take you, and letting you way too far off the leash into way too many places is not going to be able, it's not going to enable them to deliver you the best narrative or the intended narrative. And perhaps that doesn't mean it needs to be one uh, through line that's canon, but it's probably more like two or three or four, or there are important divergent paths, like people who live and die, or an end game situation like Life is Strange, the end of Life is Strange, where perhaps everything's been fairly similar the whole way through. Life is Strange is one of those games where people might live or die, you might succeed or fail at different things. There are definitely opportune resolutions that you may or may not arrive at, but everything will take you to that same conclusion. And at that conclusion, you're given a binary choice of what's going to happen. And there is an argument to be made there that it nullifies everything beforehand, but I would argue this is just the nature of the beast. If you want a really good story, then it is a balance of giving you agency, but not so much agency that they're not able to give you beautiful cutscenes because they know where you're going to end up, and they don't have endless budget, that they're not able to provide dialogue, performances, and scenes that are all at the same level, because instead of dedicating time and resources and effort into uh, a more centralized 1, 2, 3, 4 possible options, they're trying to give you 20. And just as a result of developer time and energy and resources and budget, those end up going the way of quantity instead of quality. So far in this game, and again, I'm speaking to early game, I think is doing a really good job of letting you have agency, particularly in the way that you decide to speak to your little misfit group of dum-dums. Uh, the way that you can support them. There is certain things where you can succeed or fail in mechanical situations, not just in the dispatching, but there are elements, for example, at the end of the third episode where you need to do hacking. There is a hacking minigame where you're carrying along a little like discrete set of a matrix, I suppose. You just jump from one dot point to the next, and sometimes you go up and down, unlock certain areas. And those seem fairly rudimentary at the beginning. They get harder. They get quite a bit harder. At one point, sort of overseer sensor is thrown in that chases you around whilst you're trying to unlock paths, relock paths, remember codes, get to the next area. Those are tense as hell and get my heart pounding. So that's pretty cool. There's a lot to do there that isn't just chatting and making decisions. And I think that the diversification of those elements is really great. And I'm getting to a point where I appreciate what I imagine is going to be meaningful evolution of these characters. And I certainly know what it's like, having played a lot of games where this is the case, what it is like to start with a group of characters, or perhaps just a couple of characters within a game that are the worst. I'm talking about the start of Cyberpunk, how absolutely exhausting Johnny is. Keanu Reeves' character is the worst, and I absolutely hated him and felt completely differently by the end. I feel the same about, if you ever played Until Dawn, I feel the same about Emily. At the start of that game, she sucks, and I have a real let's fucking go, bitch energy for her as it goes through the game, if she survives, because of course all of them can die. And Until Dawn is another great example of there are enormous consequences to the things you do. Everyone in that game can die, same as is the case in, I believe, almost every supermassive game who are the developers of Until Dawn. But there are those set pieces you may see or not see, but ultimately you're heading toward the same conclusion. There may be different people present, there may be different things that have happened along the way, but in order to tell you a good story, everything does need to be sitting within a channel. You might be at different places on the road, you might zigzag, but there needs to be a road. If there's not a road, I think it's very hard to tell you a compelling story. So that's sort of how I feel about. You didn't ask. That's sort of how I feel about uh, the argument of the illusion of choice and whether that's a good or a bad thing and how that should be best managed. But let me know what you think. I'd be really interested because there are so many schools of thought on when this works, when it doesn't, how much freedom you should have, and yeah, it definitely changes from studio to studio and the kind of story that's being told and the way they want to deliver that narrative, how much they want to lean into making you feel like you are the teller of your own destiny versus making you feel like you have a say in the same way like an RPG, you know, like I'm playing Outer Worlds 2. There are choices I make there a bunch, you know, it's the same thing. You say something to a teammate and they'll remember it. And you're not 100% sure how much that's going to matter down the way. But there is a flexibility in the way that you're engaging, in the way that you are representing your protagonist, taking yourself through the game world and how you interact with NPCs. In an RPG, you generally expect that road to be slimmer. There are so many mechanical things going on in RPG, so many systems, so many characters, usually an enormous number of side quests, fetch quests, locations, that it's expected that the decisions you make will rarely have game long consequences, perhaps accepting things in the main quest from time to time. But of course, there's an expectation that a game with one of its central mechanics being the ability to make decisions that has far less of those systems would make those decisions more meaningful. So I think there's two relevant and totally valid schools of thought, and I'd love to know which one you're in. So yeah, I'm having a really good time with Dispatch. It's very addictive. I like its mini games. I'm already nervous to do more of the hacking mini game next time I play because that stretches my ability to remember a simple code whilst being hunted by a big red ball, which I didn't know was one of my great fears, but now I know. So that's the end of that segment. Now, the other game I've been playing, the other game I've been playing that I mentioned is Outer Worlds 2. And I want to talk about that in a new segment, brand new segment to the show. We're only 3 episodes in, and I've chosen a different format of thumbnail every single time. So brand new is relative while we're working it all out and probably will remain relative. But this is a segment called Game Changer, and I made a graphic for you. I hope you like it. So essentially what I want to talk about in this segment, I think, did I write this on the graphic? I think I did, is something within a game, whether it is perhaps something meta about the game, something in the process, or probably more often than not, a mechanic, plot line, something a game is doing differently, or perhaps something it's doing that is a pattern between a bunch of games that I think is really interesting and deserves to be called out. Maybe I call it out because it's really bad. Maybe it's changing the game for the worse, but I think mostly we'll do changing the game for the better. In this particular segment, I want to talk about the flaws mechanic in Outer Worlds 2. I think this mechanic is fantastic. It is interesting for a whole bunch of reasons. So I should say at the top, because this is something I need to do more often. Outer Worlds 2 is a brand new quote unquote mini RPG. At least the first game was absolutely a mini RPG, which is to say it has all the flavor of a Bethesda RPG, of a cyberpunk. This feels particularly very reminiscent of Starfield, but it's pared back. It's pared back mechanically. You may have heard me talk about it 2 podcast episodes ago, where I was talking about a really good example of this is the fact that there's no lockpicking minigame. There's no encumbrance. There are a lot of things here that just make it more accessible, more palatable. You're tackling with the systems of it less. Which isn't to say it doesn't have many systems, it still does have a lot. And there's granularity there in terms of the stats associated with your gear. There's a bunch of different weapons. There is loads of different perks and a handful of skills. But its general tone and the flexibility with which it gives you the ability to engage and complete its missions in so many different ways makes it feel less brutal. For example, I put myself in a position where I've taken a bunch of these floors, which give you pretty great perks, but also come with enormous game long debuffs, and you cannot get rid of these flaws once you have them. Essentially, they become an addendum attached to your character. And I'm just going to pull up the game here so I can tell you exactly what mine are and what they do. But essentially, I feel like it fits with the theme of we're just gone real goofier. It isn't that this isn't as good of an RPG. It's just doing something different and doing something different intentionally. There's a humor, an irreverence, a light-hearted, low-key nature to the entire thing that whilst it's still dealing with some heavy things, like there's a lot of politics going on here, who's right, who's wrong. There are, the world's ending, because of course it is. But it's not. It doesn't feel like it's taking itself too seriously. For every serious conversation, there's probably 10 really stupid things that happen that will just make you laugh and that are just enjoyably silly. And I think that that's really fantastic. It is much bigger than I expected it to be. It's bigger than the last game, and there are some bits and pieces I have gripes with as a old school WRPG fan. I love the granularity of stats, of like knowing all the percentages of what my critical chance is, depending on what I have equipped, like exactly the amount of points of damage I'm doing of each elemental type. It does not offer that in a way that drives me a little bit crazy. When you drop into the stat summary, you are told your overall health points, XP the next level, your gadget energy, which is what you can use to function gadgets, which do things like slow down time, or give you a little visor where you can get external information about your environment and about your enemies. But there's nothing more specific on exactly what it is that your weapons are doing, down to it like a extremist granular level. So despite equipping things that, for example, do an amount of weak spot damage, those change based on other factors of perks you may have, or skills, or things you have equipped. It's very difficult to find a cumulative number of what overall is your ability to reduce any toxicity that you might get as the game goes on. Like, what is your overall evasion chance? You can see ones that are attached to each independent piece of gear or weapon, but when you equip a combination of things, it's kind of guesswork what certain things mean. For example, you're often told that you get damage reduction, but damage reduction from what statistic, as a result of which cumulative factors of damage reduction, is a mystery. As much of a mystery as you probably trying to pass the sentence that I just said. There are things like that that I'm a little bit like, oh, could use more information. But I was talking to my friend Ed about this yesterday, and I think that also just feeds into it's not that serious. It is a game with no encumbrance, where silly things happen, and it's a game where I have been able to not put any points into guns or melee, quite literally zero, and I'm making my way through. I'll run through a lot of fights. I have certain abilities that buff my attack in different ways, or I'm cautious and come at things from afar. I lean much more heavily on my gadgets because I put a lot of points into science. So yeah, it's forgiving in that way. It lets you sort of be goofy and make really odd RPG decisions you would not make in any other RPG that actually demands mastery of its systems or forces you to be too shit to continue. um, it's also a huge encouragement to just lean in. You can't respec. I really like that. I said before on a stream that I think respec is cheating and you should have to live with your decisions, which is really bloody rich coming from someone who saves scums as much as I do, but I maintain it's different. Why? I can't really tell you 100%, but I do. So yes, back to the main thrust of the floor system and why I think it's so great. Apart from the fact that I think it falls so neatly in line with the thing that makes this game different and great. It's low key. Don't worry about it. Irreverence and tone. Uh, the floors system itself essentially offers you, based on the way you play, uh, a series of floors. They're floors. So, for example, let me just run you through it. One of the ones I got, which is insane, and I would never play an RPG this way ever. I'm a huge min-maxer. I'm gonna lean early into lockpicking. I picked observation and hack. I do not want to be locked out of anything. My biggest gripe when I start an RPG is coming across a chest and I don't have the lockpicking skill to open it. That is untenable for me. I'm pretty severe locked in about the way that I tend to approach that. And I think what I'm loving about this game is the encouragement to not be that person. I did start the game as that person. Those were the skills I spec'd into. But what I did, because I'm also a skill point hoarder, is I like to hang on to skill points. And when I come up against a check, if I have skill points to spare and say I can't get into a door because this door is not a lock, it's an engineering related door, and I need 2 points in engineering to open it. Great. I don't spend my skill points until the game is like, you need to use it. And essentially what I'll do is happily be shit at combat as long as I'm not locked out of any content. I would rather suffer through battles because I don't have any points in guns or melee if it means I can open a chest or hack a terminal later in the game. So that's kind of what I ended up doing. Now, normally that wouldn't go as far as me having no points in guns or melee, but what I've done is, because I had that approach, I already had a point in, I had points in lockpicking, I have points in speech. That's a big one I hate being locked out of. There is an observation skill that reveals hidden objects. So that lockpick hack all felt like things I absolutely had to have in order to have access to everything in the game that may be hidden or gated away from me. And those are the things I care about most. So I arrive at a door, as described before, and said door is jammed. There's a way of opening it, which is one of the traits you can pick at the beginning of the game. There's a small handful of them. They're somewhat funny, but you can only grab one. I think you can grab two if you take a floor at the beginning of the game, which I also did, but I won't get distracted and tell you about that in a second. Oh, are you about to be entertained by the first floor I'm going to tell you about? So what I did was hit this door. I did not have the trait I needed. The other way of opening the door was having engineering skill. Awesome. Don't spend my skill points. I had two to just pop into engineering. So I did that. And what that meant was that was the fifth skill that I'd then spec'd into. The game pops a floor. Now, as I said, these floors pop depending on the way that you play the game. The game pops this floor. It jumps up in your face, fills the screen over everything else. You have discovered a floor. like a character flaw is essentially what it means. Said flaw is called easily distracted, which I think we can all agree. If you're this far into the podcast, listening to this, if you've heard the other ones, watch my Twitch streams, have watched me on What Culture, just know of my existence at all, you would agree is fairly accurate. So normally I'd min-max in a game, so popping this one was interesting, but let me read you the description. It says your skills are erratic, to say the least. Now, again, remember this is because I spec'd into my 5th skill. It says a jack of all trades is oftentimes better than a master of one. You can raise more skills faster, but it will be harder to ever maximize any particular one. So this is sort of the anti min-maxer, which is normally what I do. I'd have like 1 point in a few things, maybe if I needed them. Otherwise, I'd maximum lockpick, maximum speech, don't want to be locked out of anything, want to talk my way out of every situation. So mechanically, what this means is that when leveling, you can only add skill points into your lowest non-zero skill or any skill that you have 0 in. But while you are restricted in that way, and just to illustrate that, for example, if I had 3 stats, one of them's at 1, one's at 7, and one's at 8, I cannot take the 8 skill to 9 until the 1 skill is leveled up to 8. So everything has to be the same, or everything up the top just cannot be taken up until the one below it is up, or you just have to leave it to never go higher the entire game. Now, the trade-off is you get 1 extra skill point gained per level, which is pretty good. So I've gone long game. I decided to pick that, which is deeply unlike me. And as a result, what I'm doing is I have 0 in almost everything except for 6. Except for lockpick, engineering, hack, science, observation, and speech. What I need to do to take any of these progressively higher, which you need to do because the skill checks get harder, is I have to level all of them at the same time. Is this better than if I got 1 less skill point every time I leveled and just decided to min-max and go into a bunch of different things? I don't know. But it is funnier and it's different and it's something I wouldn't do. The most interesting part of it is if I come up against something that, say, only requires 1 skill point in guns to overcome, I can't do that. Because if I put 1 point in guns, it means all my other skills that are currently at 13 cannot be progressed to 14 until I get 13 more skill points. So that's, what's that math? Like 4 more levels, all of whom skill points have to be pumped into guns and none of my other skills, which is going to take fucking forever. So I can't put a point into anything else or I absolutely fuck myself more than I already did. But upon taking that flaw, there is the understanding that it's going to change the way you play. And I liked the idea of that. Normally I wouldn't. Normally I'm such a person that plays games in a very similar way, no matter what it is. I like a dual-wield rogue. I used to really love stealth. I kind of still do. I love a sniper rifle. I learned in Cyberpunk. I love a incendiary sniper rifle. Learned in Bioshock. I'm big on a shotgun. I tend to like to do the same sorts of things in games. So the flaws system really encourages and enables you whilst you're not totally losing out, because it's not just doing something bad for you, it's doing something really good. Getting another skill point every single level you gain is a big deal. That's a big plus. But having to balance it with something that fundamentally changes the way you're able to play the game is fun. Now, you don't have to take the flaws. You are offered the flaw. You can reject it if you want to. Though I will say, I popped a flaw as a result of popping and accepting so many flaws. I had accepted enough flaws that I was offered the flaw of flawed. The flaw was called flawed, and it essentially meant that whilst I think what it offered me was 15% more experience, which is fantastic, it did mean that I had to accept every single flaw the game gave me. So you would lose the ability to say, I don't really like the trade off there. I don't want to do it. Uh, which would be wild. And you are warned every single time that you cannot get rid of flaws once you've accepted them. There is no way to do it. This particular flaw even said, this is not recommended for your first time playthrough. It will fundamentally change the experience in a huge way and make the game a lot harder, but probably extremely funny. There was also one that I popped as a result of speeding through dialogue because I'm a save scummer. So I'd want to see how something might play out differently. Or I'd just keep checking in with my crew. And as a result, they'd say the same thing. So I'd spacebar through it. I did that enough times that I was offered a flaw. And I don't remember the name of it because I didn't accept it. It basically was like, you don't give a shit about people talking or like, you know, engaging meaningfully in conversations. No problem. We got you. And what the trade-off there was, and boy, they do a good job in making them tempting enough that even though the debuff, the bad part of it is bad, you really do think about it. This one gave you a bunch of extra experience, which is pretty much, I think, the best bonus thing you can get in an RPG. But the negative was you were no longer able to decide how you replied in conversations. This is a game where things go down extraordinarily differently based on how you speak to people. You can talk your way out of almost anything. You can make people incensed and attack them with a dialogue option pretty much every time you engage with somebody and there's any element of conflict. At least those two options will be available, if not a bunch more. And this would make it so essentially every time you replied to somebody, it would be a roulette on what you said. It would just, the game will pick for you one of the answers and the chips just fall as they may, which is extraordinarily strange and just not a thing any other game would put in, I reckon. It's nuts. I've accepted I'll just tell you quickly, the following flaws. Easily distracted. I picked one, dependent. Some lead from the front, you tend to lead from the back as much as possible, becoming dependent on your allies. So this is a result of, as I said, I've got no ability in combat, so I do tend to send them in and I'll snipe from afar or whatever. You deal less damage in general, but you gain a large bonus to damage if attacking an enemy that your companions attacked first. Another one's gluttony. You get more healing from food and drink, but you're slower in combat. That's as a result of me eating so much food. I got one called anger mismanagement. You get irrationally angry at the smallest of slights. In your fury, you're worse at blocking. That's fine. I don't block in games like this. I don't want to block. Blocking's for losers. But your power attacks deal more damage. That was fantastic. Popping stuff where I'm like, great. The negative part of this doesn't bother me at all. I absolutely want the pro there. It's just so enjoyable and it's so surprising, and it's not something that is familiar to me. And anything in a game that I play, particularly this far into just the quality, quantity, and sheer decades of the existence of video games, for there to be something that feels surprising and unique and novel, is just an absolute treat. And I'm really enjoying that. It's keeping things really fresh for me in what is otherwise a pretty by the numbers RPG experience. It's definitely got that flavor and humor that makes it different. There's the enjoyable irreverence. It is, however, very similar to the first game. And it's just adding a little something something that keeps things fun and weird. And I'm really enjoying that. So yeah, if you're playing Outer Worlds 2 Let me know what your favorite flaw is that you've popped. I've also popped some more that I didn't end up taking, but I tend to take a screenshot because I think that they're entertaining when they came up. So yeah, it's 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 a really unique and fun part of a game that I'm largely having a lot of fun with. So that's the end of that segment. Boy, do I like to talk. You probably noticed by this point in the video that it's like an hour long, and I said there's going to be 3 segments or 4 segments, and those 2 segments took a really long time. So let's jump right to questions. But don't worry, if you're like, man, that segment sounded interesting, when are you going to do the non-video game segment or the other thing? I will. Don't worry. But I cannot be giving you a video that's an hour and a half. It was already alerted to me that I said in the last video that I simply cannot be giving you a video that's an hour or 20 minutes, an hour and 20 minutes. And someone said, looks at time code of how long the video is. And it's just like, Jessica. So you already know how long this takes. What I'm going to do is jump through a few viewer questions, and then as always I will do the rest of the questions in the bonus subscriber coffee or Patreon. It'll be on both. You only have to be at one place. No need to subscribe to both, although if you do want to be a free member over at Patreon, you can watch ad-free episodes. Yeah, so I'll answer all the rest of them that I don't get to hear on that. What exactly we're going to do in the bonus episode this week? I think it might be moving furniture. I just do what you guys say you want to watch me do. You've suggested, Jessica, when you have to do dumb chores around the house, you can just talk to us while you do them. I'll set up my tripod. Maybe I'll do some of that. Maybe I'll make you a meal. Maybe I do something exciting. You let me know. You let me know what you want to see and we'll work it out. But I'm going to answer a couple of questions before I'm done. So this is the segment of questions, which you probably already know because I probably already ran the title card. So the first question, this one comes from Cheese, is knowing what you know now from however many years you've been streaming, because I'm not sure how long it's been. If we include GameSpot, it's been since I was 20, 21. So a lot. However long that is, would you do anything differently? Meaning, based on what you've learned from the experience so far, would you change anything if you could? It's a really good question. It's very interesting. There's things I would have liked to do differently, but I know probably would have been quite difficult to expect myself to have actually done at the time. I think not taking criticism so harshly, or perhaps following the advice of people older than me and quote unquote not reading the comments. I don't think I see that literally, because I literally do read all your comments and I care about them and I couldn't imagine myself not reading them. But I think the spirit of don't read the comments, which is noticing, interpreting, and validating that the state of most of our minds, the human condition, is to emphasize the negative and criticism, and you will likely house and dwell on one thing somebody said that was hurtful or unkind or an undue criticism, or perhaps it was an accurate criticism. Jessica, you ramble so much. I can't watch this. That's not invalid, but there is I think an inescapable, and this exists in every job, every relationship, every friendship, so many of the things you do. You will amplify your flaws, your own failings, and you'll amplify, even if it is 1%, 0.01% of the feedback or the truth or the actual measure of success. That's the bit that you'll remember and see. And I think I would have liked for myself to be able to look at the bigger picture. And I still hope this for myself. And I think about it, and I think I try to work on it all the time to see the volume of support and people who are there and care about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it and the things that they like about it, not the things I sit back and think might be wrong or that I'm doing wrong or that one person didn't like or this physical criticism or, maybe it's a relationship that didn't work out, something that you've got in one of your jobs. Perhaps you were laid off. Perhaps, you had a really bad situation. You were fired. A project went completely awry. It is so easy to look at that, and I think take it personally is the wrong way of saying it, because I think that that sounds like your feelings are invalid about it. I don't think it's that. I think it's just to look at it within the context of everything you've done, everything you have achieved, the way that you tried and continue to try, and the value that you have and that exists beyond one instance of something that might have gone awry, or an instance of someone who doesn't like you. And I think that was a huge thing for me. I think I really struggled when I was younger with being a people pleaser. I really struggled with the quantification, is that a word, of whether I was good or not. Was so, and this is just growing up working on journalism, where there is a huge factor of numbers, uh, of success. Whether I did good was related to how many people engaged with something. It wasn't how many people enjoyed it. It wasn't, for example, what I'm doing here. Obviously, other podcasts, you watch other videos. These aren't insane numbers, but the amount of you that talk to me, that care, that want to be a part of this conversation, and the way that you talk about uh, receiving this content and getting joy out of it or interest, I would have liked and always would like to base my value and success off of those things and not worry about that need to be liked or to universally be something that is seen to constantly provide entertainment and be informative, and just like 100% of people are like, yes, great, love it, because people won't like you. That is the reality of everything. No matter what you do, no matter how great you are, no matter who you are, there will be people who just don't like you. They don't like the thing you did. They watched it, they experienced it, they did everything right in the way they engaged with it, and they just came away without feeling positively about it or feeling positively about you, and that's so fine. And I think that's what I would change, was just that mindset and perspective. Uh, and I think that that is really hard. That is an impossible thing to have expected baby me to change. I think it's hard for anybody, but that's what I would have wished for myself, and I'm much better at that now. And I think that's been a game changer, but not that segment, just a game changer personally, in sort of a non-video game thing segment way. But I haven't done that segment yet either. I do understand how I say sentences like that, and it makes sense to me and not to you. Anyway, and I think the other thing is just to, and I'm much better at this now too, to care about the quality of something I do and not a number attached to it. To not have begun streaming and feel like the thing I did wasn't good because there was 10 people there, because it wasn't worse. I just wasn't like at a place where I had a bigger audience, and that I still have that. It's like on days where there's 50 people watching, one, that's still loads of people, like really when you think about it. But just because that number might be a fraction of what someone else is getting doesn't mean that what I'm doing, or that my content is inferior in any way. And I think housing that perspective and spotlighting that has been meaningful for me, and is something that I'm still, I think, very much learning. And it's been a huge thing over the last year, is highlighting that the things that you guys say to me in the comments, or just the way that you chat on Twitch, matters more than the Twitch summary that tells me how many concurrents I got. And being able to care more about the former than the latter just makes my entire job more fun. And I think more effective, because the thing I want out of this is like to entertain you. And I've always said this, and this has always been true, even when I had more people pleasing insecurity. What's always remained true is I would rather have 30 people here who really care and are having a good time, and are just stoked, and don't necessarily need to be engaging. You can be lurking, whatever you want to do, but people who are having a good time, and care about what's happening, than 1,000 people who don't give a shit. And I will always feel that way. And I think remembering that, and remembering that that's my personal value, one over the other, has made what I do more enjoyable, and on a regular basis. And yeah, so that's probably the answer to that one. Is a very interesting question. I'll answer one more. Zombie said, I'd like to ask a belated Halloween question. What got you interested in horror as a genre, and what are your favorite pieces of horror media? Um, oh, God, I have to speak faster. I might talk about this. I might talk about this a little bit more in the bonus episode when I get to the other questions, because this goes on so long. I might just start making it clear that this is really just Jessica talking about two things. Because I think this might be what other podcasts do. When they sit down and there's a group of people, surely they only get through like two things. So, two things. Another new name of this podcast. Jessica talks about two things. That's a good idea. Anyway, I've always been a huge scaredy cat, in response to what I feel like about the horror genre. I still remember when I was like 7 years old and I was on the stairs, and mom and dad would have been watching some like wrap up show or like list kind of thing that talked about a bunch of different movies, and there was the scene. They weren't watching The Exorcist, but it was a scene from The Exorcist with like Linda Blair. It is Linda Blair, right? Walking down the stairs backwards, like crab walking backwards. And I was so horrified. I was like scarred for life. I also watched some horror movies like super young. And I'm just like, I'm a big baby. I don't believe in ghosts or anything like that. But I'm just such a scaredy cat. I have a very vivid imagination. I always have. I'm very prone to nightmares. There was a spider in here the other day, and I just about fucking moved out. I almost carked it. That means died in Australian, if you don't speak our stupid phrases. Yeah, I'm a huge scaredy cat. And I think there's something about that that makes horror really appealing. I remember one of the first interviews I did when I was at GameSpot was with Thomas Grip, who you may know as the game director of Amnesia and Penumbra before that. And he said this thing that I always remember, that people love horror games because it sort of hits this monkey brain biological part of us where we like to be scared. It activates these systems in us that only function when we feel we are at threat. And so he said, what happened, a gazillion years ago was it is the same thing that would be activated, when he said we were like had to be worried about being like eaten by bears. And now the vast majority of us living in modern societies in first world countries don't have to worry about pretty much any threat like that, I say, after the huntsman spider bit. But even a huntsman spider can't fucking hurt me. Can't hurt me at all. Can scare me, but absolutely can't hurt me. And he said, which is sort of the exact equivalent of what I'm saying, people like playing horror games because it activates that same feeling. For example, I know the spider can't hurt me, but it gets your adrenaline going. It puts you in that place that our bodies are biologically engineered to go. And it is a fascinating, confronting, and activating experience. It's a thrill, and I think that there's something really interesting about that. Uh, and and I also, as someone who I like a challenge and to best something, uh, when I used to host, as many of you guys have brought up, a show, a live stream show at GameSpot called House of Horrors with my friend Herein. We do that every week, and we play a different horror game, which was an absolute nightmare for me. I would try and pick games that were technically horror games, but like a little bit like not too bad, but there were some absolute brutal ones. And so one of us would drive each week. She would play like Fatal Frame, and I'd play like Alan Wake. But for me, it was still like so scary. I remember playing Slender, the 8 pages. This was the before the full game Slender. And I managed to do the whole thing, and I was just obliterated. That game is so bloody scary. It is shocking how little it requires on the graphics side to just get you. But I remember getting all the pages, and I just felt like a hero. And since then, I feel like I've had this delight and flirtation with horror in general. Um, I still am like, how scary is this before I leap into things necessarily? You probably won't catch me watching Paranormal Activity or any Japanese horror movie because I'm not there yet. Um, but I love horror as a realm in which it enables kind of what I was talking about with unique video games. There are so many unique and interesting ideas. It is a fabulous genre for exploring dark themes in interesting ways that are often represented as metaphors or allegories. Look at Silent Hill 2 as a fantastic example. Uh, Soma has such interesting things to say about what it means to be a human, philosophizing on various things. Midsummer is one of my favorite films. I've always really liked gore as well. I think gore uh, gore and I go hand in hand more because I find it absolutely fascinating and I like grisly stuff. And gore often doesn't lean into the grudge ring. There's a very wet girl with hair dripping all the way down to here coming at you like this. That's the stuff I struggle with in the horror realm. But anything it's like big like monster movies I love. Alien and Predator and zombies and I love Saw. I used to watch Hostel. Yeah, I think those things are like mentally challenging and taxing. And it's just an interesting experience that it's just I'm sure it's some of that like our just biological monkey brain thing that's like, yeah, cool. I remember how I react when I feel like I'm under complete threat. And it is that like adrenaline and thrill as well. And then Thomas Grip said this when I spoke to him. There is something delightful about having that experience in absolute safety. So it is more safety than a huntsman spider, technically, because I think that's still in my house. And whilst it can't hurt me, they can bite you. They can bite you. They're not poisonous, but they could bite you. I never get close enough for it to bite me because I'm too scared to get close enough. But they do that. I didn't think it would really hurt, but anyway. Uh, but yeah, there's something about getting to have that experience in what is actually complete safety. Is something that people just crave and love, and it's so cool. And I think I feel that way as well. Yeah, there's so many things I mean, I like the goofier side. I like Cabin in the Woods, yeah, Midsummer, Saw. I'm trying to think of like other really scary stuff I enjoy. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's in that I guess is technically in horror, like Buffy and Angel, but those I'd say aren't really horror. Um, there's so many things that I think it does in a really fascinating way. I'm also the kind of person that if I'm too chicken shit to watch something, but it sounds really interesting or looks really interesting, I'll like read the plot because it's like I care about the story, or I'll watch someone else play the game. I'll watch it like on Twitch or YouTube, where it's just like, I can't get through it. Like for example, I was playing Amnesia: The Dark Descent with my dad, and we got to the prison level. This was like 10, well, 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. No, 15. And we got to the prison level, and it's just too fucking scary. We were both like, no. Watch Day 9 play that one, which is a fantastic playthrough. If you've never seen Day 9 plays Amnesia, that's an absolute treat. Yeah, so I think whether or not I'm brave enough to necessarily always engage in it is subjective. I think just objectively, it's a fascinating genre, however you're approaching it, from whatever form of media, and I think it is so underrated. Get Out is really good. I'd say that's a little bit more of a thriller. It's also much like all genre. All genre is just so flexible. But yeah, it's just very cool. It's just very interesting, and I love anything that opens up an avenue for engagement and critical thought or entertainment or whatever it is in a way that you didn't expect. Um, and I think it does that really well, and that's what I love about video games that are doing something different. And I think this is in exactly the same space. So that's the end of that segment. And that's the end of this podcast episode. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I've had a lot of fun talking to you about it. I am supposed to be doing something in 3 minutes, so this accidentally worked out really well. Yeah, I really appreciate you being here. I hope you like this episode. Let me know what your takeaway is on all this bullshit. I love talking to you about this stuff, so I hope you like hearing it. It is unusual that it's not Twitch, so you can't immediately talk back to me, but as I said, I read all your comments, and I'm so interested in your thoughts on everything I talked about. So do let me know. If you want to support me in any way, shape, or form, there's the Patreon and the coffee. There will be a bonus episode going up within the week, where I'll answer all the rest of your questions and do some bullshit. Last week, you could watch me string up nanolights where I just crawl around my garden for like an hour, precariously standing on things that may or may not support my weight, hoping I don't fall down in front of the camera. So you can check that out if you want to on the podcast here. But yeah, I hope you enjoy all the goodies that have gone up so far. And I hope that you've enjoyed your time here. If you're hearing me say this, oh my God, you've listened to the whole podcast and you're literally amazing and my favorite person. I appreciate you so much. And I will see you again super soon. Bye.